has helped negotiate that ceasefire in Gaza. But I mean, his plans for Gaza, about making it the Riviera of the Middle East. I mean, again, there's a lot of work there. That's a very tenuous, fragile situation. So he hasn't had a lot of results right now other than that ceasefire, which is fragile. So for all his time and effort on foreign affairs and foreign policy, I don't think we've seen a whole lot yet delivered. And by the way, they don't give Nobel Prizes to people who negotiate surrender agreements and make concessions to brutal dictators, authoritarian dictators.
Yeah, the way the agreement goes down obviously matters a lot. David, Trump was asked earlier about who he'll pick to replace Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Trump went after Powell again for renovations being done at the Fed building. Let's listen.
We're thinking about bringing a gross incompetence, what's called gross incompetence lawsuit. It's gross incompetence against Powell. I'd love to fire him, but we're so close, maybe maybe I still might.
Powell's term, David, we should note, expires in May.
Right.
So it's just
May.
months away. But what do you think about him, threatening to fire him again?
I think that it's the last week of December, and there's a lot of reruns on TV, and this is one of them. I mean, we've heard all of this before. He went over to the Fed, and he made these allegations, and, the chairman gave spontaneous rebuttal. But here's the thing that people should be concerned about. He wants control of the Fed because he wants to manipulate interest rates to his political advantage, to what he perceives as his political advantage. That's the reason that the Fed is an independent agency. That's the reason why the Fed chairman has some degree of distance from the president. So I think he's looking forward to May. Maybe people believe that their interest rates will come down more. And of course, people are hurting, as we said, and they may in the short run appreciate that. But Powell is looking at inflation as well as the job situation and trying to balance those two, which is what a Fed chair should. But let me tell you something. His beef with Powell allegedly is that Powell mismanaged the remodeling or the rebuilding of the Fed building or the building of the new Fed. And his obsession with those kinds of issues actually are a political problem for him. I mean, people are sitting around and thinking about how they're going to pay their bills, and he's posting stuff about how he's going to have marble hand rails at the Kennedy Center, and he's posting marble pictures of his new marble palm room at the White House and so on. And people are saying to themselves, what the hell does that have to do with me? I thought he was going to be fighting for me to bring my costs down. And he seems obsessed with gold and putting his name on things and remodeling buildings and rebuilding, monuments to himself. And I think this is a huge political problem for him. It's a symbol of his distraction. It's the Marie Antoinette thing that he's got going. That is a big political problem. And not for him, as Charlie points out, he's not on the ballot in next November, but Republicans should be really concerned about what they're seeing.
And I mean, in that regard, talking about the Fed chair and whoever the next one is, Sochi, I wonder if it gives you pause that the Fed chair does have to be confirmed, right? And you do have a midterm election where folks may have to answer for who they pick, who they confirm. Does that give you hope that there will be a steady hand at the Fed?
It does give me hope. I think this is twofold. I think, like David said, he wants to have a grasp on interest rates. I think he's also looking for somebody to blame at a time when the American people are blaming Trump for the economy, and yet Donald Trump won't take responsibility. And so he needs someone else that he can point the finger at. And right now he is pointing the finger at the Fed. But yes, it does give me hope that the it's the Senate's responsibility to ensure that they are vetting whoever the nominee is. I will say that Pete Hegseth was confirmed by a very slim margin. And I do think that I wonder whether some senators have that regret given everything that is happening. So we have seen firsthand when a confirmation occurs and the person is not qualified. The Fed is at another level because they should be independent, and which raises